Hello and welcome, Jeet. Thanks for joining us here on the Graph the Show. So Jeet is a serial entrepreneur. You currently own and I guess founded the Incubator, which is an online academy, and you also have Ahana Nutrition. But prior to that, you've also founded some other companies. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So a couple of the businesses that you just talked about are some of the things that I'm currently doing. In addition to that, I'm doing a lot of public speaking, really just trying to build up my personal brand and really just trying to motivate and inspire as many people as I can to get into entrepreneurship, to pursue their dreams, and just kind of helping them out with all that kind of stuff. So yeah, those are the three things that really take up most of my time right now and are kind of the big passions in my life.
And obviously you've been featured on TEDx and a few other publications as well. I've actually gone and listened to your TEDx talk as well, so I have a fair understanding of your early beginnings as well. Do you want to just give our listeners maybe an overview into your roots and why you actually started, or actually rather went down the route of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm 25 years old, so I really began my entrepreneurial journey when I was 17, but I'll kind of take it back a couple of years prior to that. So around the age of 15, one morning my father just came into my room, kind of woke me up bright and early in the morning, and he told me, hey, I've been thinking and I think you need to go get a job for the latest video games and going out to the movies and all the fun and leisure things that you do, you know? And so it was a pretty rough awakening call for a 15-year-old, but my family was very traditional in that manner. And so I went off and I started getting a bunch of minimum wage jobs. So I started taking jobs after school, anything from tutoring to cleaning floors to door-to-door sales to telemarketing. So for 2 years, I just grinded through these different jobs, and one thing kept happening. I kept getting fired or quitting from every single job. And it was pretty crazy because in 2 years I had held almost 12 different jobs.
Oh, wow.
And so something just didn't seem right, and I just felt like something was wrong with me. And my entire plan in life was to go to college, get a nice business degree, work a corporate 9 to 5, and I thought life would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't able to work 10 to 15 hours extra part-time a week after school. And so at this point I realized, man, I think something's really wrong with me. I don't know how I'm going to ever work. So I kind of got really freaked out one night, and I started plugging in these so-called symptoms into Google. And one of the first things that popped up to me was this video from Richard Branson. And Richard Branson kind of talks about his early days and how he felt like he was unemployable, how he felt like a prison and had no freedom when he was at work, and all these emotions that he shared. And I absolutely related with every single one of these emotions. And it was at that point that I realized, man, I think I need to be an entrepreneur because this totally makes sense to me. So at 17, I just said, you know what, let's go out there and let's start a company and see what happens. And that's really how I got into entrepreneurship, the roots behind it, and I have never looked back since.
Fantastic. And I really want to touch on something there because you mentioned that your family has quite a traditional background. And I think a lot of people could probably relate to that in terms of they're expected to do that 9 to 5 corporate job. It's the norm. How did you actually convince maybe your family that entrepreneurship is the right thing for you, especially if they did have that traditional view of a corporate job is the right thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents were very, very big on education in school and college and things of that nature. So it wasn't initially when I decided, oh, hey, I'm going to be a entrepreneur, that they were just oh, okay, cool. You can just drop out of school and do it. I still had to go to school and all those things. And pretty much even when I was at a point where I could drop out and all that stuff, they were still very reluctant. But for me, it was just words can only mean so much, right? I just had to prove it with my actions, you know? And that's what my parents were very big on too. So I told my parents, you know what? It's okay. I'm going to respect your life choices for me right now until I can prove myself otherwise. And so in the beginning, I just kind of grinded school and my businesses at the same time. And once I kind of proved to my parents, look, I sold a company, I started another company, we're doing well with the second company, I can really make it if you guys just trust me and let me go at this full time. And so eventually over time, I kind of just worked them into the idea of what I wanted to do, and they kind of had more belief in me, because for them it was just they were just worried about whether I'm going to be successful in life or not. And it's not so much about a selfish reason oh, I want him to get a degree for myself. So as soon as I was able to kind of prove that to them, that I'm on the right path and I can make it, just trust in me, it became pretty easy from there.
Fantastic. We'll get to the companies in just a bit, but what would you say is your ultimate goal here? What are you what's your end game, or what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. My end game, honestly, is just to be able to change the world. I think I want to build a legacy and have an impact on this world that outlives me. And if I can do that, I think I'm going to be successful. So for me, it's just about making a difference in the world, changing the world, and having something that's actively mine, that's doing good for the world when I'm gone.
Does that sound a bit daunting at first when you actually repeat that in your head? And how do you actually break that down in order to achieve that goal, I guess? Because I guess if you went and you told someone who is a new entrepreneur, you know, my goal is to change the world, they might actually get quite frightened by that potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a process. Like, even when I kind of look at it right now, it's like I know I have my whole life ahead of me to accomplish that goal. So it's just like every day taking steps and working towards that goal kind of makes it easier and kind of shrinks it down to size. Like, even right now, I wouldn't say I'm fully at the point where I feel like I'm working on my legacy project yet. It's just a process of, like acquiring the skills, learning, meeting the people, gaining the talent, and getting the financial freedom, all these different elements that really go into it, where I've come to a point where I know kind of the different things I need in order to get to my point where I can work on my legacy project and not have to worry about a lot of other things. And I think I'm still in the process of getting to that point. And hopefully I can do that in the next few years, so then I can spend the rest of my life from that point forward just working on my legacy project.
Oh, wow. And I guess you're kind of 8 years into your journey at the moment then. So it's not even necessarily, and that's probably a key message for people listening, is that it's not necessarily a straight away you jump into doing your end game, so to speak. It actually does take a significant amount of time. And sometimes, especially in your case, it's already been 8 years and maybe a couple more years, but obviously you've achieved a great amount during that time anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And even to that point, it's like when I first started 8 years ago, I didn't know this was going to be my end game. Like when I started at 17, big vision was like, man, I just want to have freedom to do what I want to do, and I just want to make some money. And then from there, like it translated into what it is today. And I think just going through the journey is such a beautiful process that you'll find out a lot about yourself and what you really want in life and stuff like that. And then from there, I think you find that deeper purpose. And I was only lucky to find that deeper purpose maybe like 2 years ago.
hmm Right. So let's deep dive a little bit into that journey of yours then. So you first started off, I believe it was with a web design company that you founded yourself. Was that at 17, if I remember right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So talk us from there, being a 17-year-old kid, and I've listened to the TEDx talk as well around how, you had quite a confidence, I guess your confidence was broken with a certain experience there, and then you've really built on things from there in order to get to a point now where you've started many companies, you've sold some of them, you're working on some new ones as well. How did you go through that journey? You must have faced a ton of challenges. Do you want to just talk us through maybe the companies to start with?
So at 17, I launched my first company, which was like the multimedia agency. We did web design, web development, all that good stuff. Faced a fair share of challenges, obstacles, made a ton of mistakes, dealt with failures, all that good stuff along the conception and the process of that first company. I had that company for 2 years, and I grew it to about 20 employees before selling it at 19. Then from there, I started my second company, which was called StatFuse, which was pretty much an online platform that helps high school students get into college. So we would calculate their odds of admission and analyze their college applications and pretty much serve as a virtual counselor. So we had that company for about 4 years. Yeah, 4 years. And we grew it to about 250,000 users. And then we ended up selling that company as well. So those were like two of the main companies that I had. And then I've had a lot of small projects, like side projects, passive income companies, and businesses here and there that I've started from 19 till now, probably around 10 in total. Some of those have succeeded very well. Some of those have failed epically. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of summary of the different companies and stuff that I've done.
I definitely want to touch on the web design company. So at the age of 19, then you had 20 employees working for you. How did that feel?
Sometimes it was just kind of something that just left me in awe. Like sometimes just knowing that, like, I have 20 people that I'm managing and their livelihoods kind of depended on me was just a crazy thought to me. Like it was just, sometimes I was just completely mind blown by it, but I think it was a really, really cool experience. Just getting to meet different people, really getting to work on my leadership and management skills. And I just felt like I learned so much by being surrounded with these 20 individuals on a day-to-day basis.
And how did you actually go about improving your management and leadership skills? Because especially at that age, I think a lot of people probably wouldn't know where to look.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I've always just been someone that goes out and just does stuff. And as I go through the process of doing, I start to learn as I make mistakes and face obstacles and challenges. So that was the same thing with leadership. I just learned a lot just going through the process of being a leader. And then the other thing that really taught me a lot was just like as I dealt with people, I was always open to hearing criticism and having them be critical and telling me how I could be a better leader. And I think just keeping that open forum and open conversation was key because that allowed other people to be able to talk to me, and that helped me grow as a leader as I learned a lot of what I can do better, how I can approach people better, how I can deal with situations better, and how I can kind of like the biggest thing I think I learned in terms of leadership and management was that nobody should be above or below anyone. It doesn't matter what your role in the company is or anything like that. Everyone should be on an equal playing field, and it's literally like a team, right? And I think when I learned that and I kind of figured out how to really implement a system like that within my business, I think the culture and everything from that point forward just became a lot easier and a lot smoother.
Yeah, I have to 100% agree with you there. I've worked in a fair few different companies and workplaces, and I've also done a little bit of coaching for some people as well. And I've always found if you're able to create that environment where everyone feels that they genuinely have a part to contribute to the bigger picture, everyone is on that equal level, then I think you're truly onto something at that point. I think that is when you probably find that people are the most productive, the most creative, they enjoy themselves the most at working at that company as well. I've definitely seen that. And on the flip side, when you often get maybe more of a top-down dictatorship type of working environment, and people often have, different levels of input and they don't feel they're always contributing, that's probably where you start seeing a lot of different challenges around people as well. And I've seen both sides of it, and I've seen the extremes of both as well. Pros and cons to both. I think in different businesses and different working environments and with different people, of course, different things work better. But I've personally found what you've described is something that I've always enjoyed myself, and I've always just noticed that people are probably the most productive in that sort of scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% in agreement.
Yeah, so just touching a little bit more on people as well, how did you go about making your first hire?
So I never really had like the complete web design, web development skills and stuff like that I needed to like really serve my clients and customers in the best way possible. And my whole concept was that I wanted to do the marketing and kind of the project management and dealing with the customers and all that good stuff, because I felt like that was the most hands-off part of the business. And because I was going to college and stuff like that, I had a lot of time constraints. So I really wanted to outsource all of the web development, web design, stuff like that. So initially when we first started, I was just hiring freelancers, like freelance contractors and good stuff like that. And then that's how I would kind of have them come and work on the web design projects. And then eventually, about a few months in, I realized that I needed another salesperson to really complement me and to be able to really go out and grow the business. So I just pretty much put up an ad on Craigslist looking for a salesperson, and I just had a bunch of conversations with a bunch of different people. And then once I locked in the candidate that I thought was the best, I gave him an offer letter, and we just kind of got jump started from there.
Oh, fantastic. And then just going further into your journey as well, you mentioned that you had quite a few different business ideas, and you tried to do a few different companies and stuff, and a few failed spectacularly, I guess. Do you want to just share maybe one or two of those failures and maybe what you learned from them?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the companies that failed was I had this idea. It's called Hypnotize, and it was this idea for a music company. So pretty much it was going to be a promotional platform for like indie artists that are looking to really get big. And so it was a way for them to use their fans to kind of promote their own material, their new music, stuff like that. So I spent a good amount of money and about 6 months of time, and we kind of built this entire platform out and pushed it to the market. And we pretty much failed terribly to the point where like none of the artists had any interest in it, and that whole idea was just a scrap. And there was a couple big things that I learned from that project. One was that never to get into a business that I know nothing about or an industry that I know nothing about, because aside from being a fan of music and like knowing like artists like Kanye and Drake and stuff like that, I never really knew the internal workings of what it meant to be an artist and how the music industry worked. So I had no idea how to market to these people and stuff like that. So first thing I learned was if you don't know something about an industry, don't get into it. Either educate yourself first or find somewhere else to go.
Yeah.
The second thing I learned was just to really humble myself through the entire process of building businesses. Cause this was in the middle of like when I had achieved a little bit of success. My first 2 businesses were doing well, all that good stuff. So I kind of shortcutted a lot of the processes that I normally would use to build a business. Cause I'm a big believer of like the lean startup and building like a minimum viable product and using like this formula to build a company. But I broke my own rules of being bootstrapped and frugal. And I just kind of ran with it, where I just dumped a lot of money and a lot of resources and a lot of energy, only to lose all that stuff because the idea was a complete failure. So I think that was a great humbling experience for me as well, where it just kind of brought me down to earth, and it just reminded me that no, not every idea that I touch is going to turn into gold, and that there's a reason the process has worked in the past, and I got to just stick to the fundamentals. So yeah, those were probably the 2 biggest things I learned from that failure.
And did you face something along the way which really questioned what you're doing, and maybe even questioned the whole idea of you being an entrepreneur?
I wouldn't say that it really questioned my idea of being an entrepreneur, just because at the same time I did also have some other businesses and stuff that were like running full time and doing well. I think the biggest thing for me was that I kind of felt like invincible at that moment, and that this failure really took that invincibility out of me, and it brought me back to like the early days, where like I realized that, I've got to always be hustling and always be working and always be doing certain things to get to where I want to be. And at that point, I think I had gotten to a point of like, maybe not comfortability, but just kind of like cockiness. And I think it was a great thing for me, because it really humbled me, and it just reminded me to get back to my roots. And it just reminded me that, if I don't keep working hard and I don't keep at it, someone else will, and they'll surpass me. And I think that helped me a lot in terms of staying on the righteous path in terms of my goals and visions.
So then, do you do anything in order to kind of keep that mindset and keep it consistent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just for me, it's just constantly like staying motivated and reminding myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because if I'm motivated and I'm inspired towards my visions and goals, I feel like there's nothing that can really stop me or derail me. It's only those times when, like entrepreneurship's a roller coaster of emotion. So sometimes you have those really good highs, and then just as much as you have those highs, you have those lows. And just in those low moments, just reminding myself why I'm doing this and what I'm doing it for, usually helps me greatly. That's one thing that I'll do. And then like the second thing that I'll do oftentimes is just surrounding myself with other like-minded individuals. I think that does wonders for me as well, because it's just a great way for me to like get inspired and motivated as I talk to other people, see other people kind of grinding towards their own goals and all that good stuff. So those 2 things really help a lot.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme. I've spoken to quite a few people now, and I actually did a recording just about a week ago, and that was quite a big thing that came up as well, around having a good set of friends or people around you that you can always kind of bounce ideas off, look to for inspiration and motivation, and that automatically just keeps you going. Quite an interesting one I had on an early episode I did was around creativity, and how one of the entrepreneurs I spoke to, actually all of their business ideas, or rather the creative ideas, they did a fashion line, used to be bounced back and forth off friends that he used to live with, and he had a really strong creative circle. They were all doing different types of arts and creative either full-time jobs or doing their own businesses, and he found that invaluable, that priceless, to actually have that amount of people and that sort of creativity constantly buzzing around him. I think he moved afterwards, and then I think he struggled for a little while to get that back up. So he kind of actively went out to different places in order to get that creativity again. But it just shows you how important it is to ensure you've got a good set of people around you to really keep you motivated. So I completely understand and appreciate that. Just on the motivational side, do you do anything in terms of your daily routines or habits to constantly keep you engaged and positive?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's just like avoiding burnout, because when in the early years of like my entrepreneurial career, I got burnt out way too much. And so I think I found a healthy balance nowadays where, like every day I'll try and go out and get a workout in, like whether it's playing basketball or going to the gym and lifting weights or doing some cardio, something like that. And I'll usually do that like in the middle of my day. So I think that helps me a lot, because like taking it like right after lunch, or maybe a couple hours after lunch, like around 2-3 o'clock, just going out and like getting my adrenaline pumping and just exercising, helps me come back to work really refreshed, versus like most people when it gets to 2-3 o'clock, they're kind of like bogged down and they're just like tired from the day and ready to get home and just stop working. Mm-hmm. But for me, it's like a fresh start. It's like I feel just as refreshed as I did at 8 a.m. when I woke up. So I think that's one thing that really does help me greatly every day. And then the other thing that I found a really good balance with is just like, spending time with friends and family and just finding a way to shut off for a couple hours, if possible, every few days, completely from the work side of things, and just, spending time with family, friends, going out, watching a movie, doing something, watching some sports, grabbing dinner, whatever it is. So those two things help me a lot.
Do you have any kind of strict daily routine? So, for example, you wake up at a certain time, you work through particular tasks or anything like that, or is it all quite fluid?
It's very fluid in terms of like what time I wake up and things like that. The only thing that I try to do and kind of try to be strict about is I try to plan out what my day is going to look like, and I try to do the toughest tasks of the day earlier in the morning. So I'll try and tackle the toughest things first, and then as the day progresses, like my task list should be getting like easier or less maybe mentally exhausting.
Do you have any advice for people who maybe are trying to look to make the most of their day? And I quite liked your advice there around trying to exercise in the afternoon rather than the morning. I'm actually someone who exercises in the morning, and I find that works for me. But do you have any general advice about structuring a day?
Honestly, I think it's just about figuring out what works for you. Like, I think it's just playing around and experimenting with a lot of different concepts, like plugging it away at like different types of like schedules, and just see the one that makes you feel the best, the one that you feel like you're the most productive, and the one that you're the most happy and satisfied with. Like for me, like my schedule has changed over time, for one, and two, I've just played around with a lot of different like formats and stuff like that. Like I've tried working out at night, I've tried working out in the morning, and those two things didn't work for me, but like working out and smack dab in the middle of the day just works great for me. And I tell most people that, and they're like, man, you're crazy, I don't know how you do that. But it's just really about finding what's natural to you and what you can really relate to and what works for you. So my best advice for people is just try a bunch of different things. Just like reorder your day as much as you can in as many different ways as you can, and see how it goes.
Yeah. And I quite liked how you also mentioned that you don't fully cut yourself away from meeting friends and, switching off every so often. How do you find the right balance for that? And I know you mentioned you do it maybe every couple of days or every few days or so, but how do you ensure that it's the right balance so you're not burning out? Because I guess even if you're maybe taking 2 hours out every few days, that might not be enough, or maybe that's too much for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's just about like, I think for me, I've just come to a point where I've just realized like I can tell when I'm feeling like I'm going to get burned out, or I'm starting to get mentally exhausted and I need a break. And I think that's one thing that really I've developed over the years. And I think it's just something that, you need to get to know yourself and your body, and eventually you kind of learn to understand when that's going to take place. So that's been one thing that I've just kind of gained that recognition for. And then sometimes the second thing is just have someone hold you accountable for it, like whether it's your significant other, a spouse, a parent, a brother, a sister, a friend, whatever it is, like they'll know if you're not spending enough time with them. So just have them hold you accountable for it, like you let them know like, hey, I'm trying to spend X amount of time with you every week, for example. If I start slipping or I don't do that, like give me a little slap, give me a little reminder, let me know. And I think even like having an accountability partner is a great way to kind of stay on track.
Yeah, I really like that idea actually. And I think a lot of people, and I think I'm probably guilty of this myself, we take it on ourselves to do everything, including trying to stay accountable. And I'm not sure if you've ever been through this, but even stuff like having, loads of task lists and trying to work through your whole to-do lists and stuff like that. Be it not having someone looking over your shoulder to sometimes just say, hey, you might want to take a break because you're probably burning yourself out, is probably something that a lot of people have been guilty of. And I certainly can think of a few people that I know personally who have probably gone down that route, and they've not had anyone almost just giving them a nudge when they need to switch off. And I've seen the burnout effects that I can have on people, and it's not good. So yeah, that's definitely a great piece of advice, I'd say, just having someone available there who can almost just call you out when needed to.
Absolutely, yeah.
So do you do anything around dealing with negativity in particular? And I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'm sure at times, you've got either negative feedback on business ideas, or you've had major challenges for a particular business. Do you do anything then to almost reset yourself and get you in the right frame of mind to deal with that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I've learned is, especially as you kind of like get a little bit more popular and you start becoming a public figure and stuff like that, is that negativity is going to always be present. And it's really a choice if I want to focus on the negativity, or I want to allow the negativity to affect me or not. And early on, obviously, as I was younger, that did happen. But nowadays, I've just kind of developed this understanding that like anyone that's successful, anyone that's famous, anyone that's someone that someone else wants to be, they're going to have a lot of people that freaking love them and a lot of people that freaking hate them, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's just a part of the process. And once you kind of just gain that awareness of that and you just come to an understanding for that, I think that's a big life-changing moment. And so I've kind of come to that realization where, like if some people are going to criticize me, they're going to hate me, all that kind of stuff. I completely have no issue to it. I'm just kind of immune to it, and I don't allow their words to get to me. And on the same token, there's going to be some people that may have criticism for you, and you just have to be willing to listen to that criticism, right? Like, don't let it affect you, but always keep an open mind and hear what they're saying, because sometimes there's going to be validity behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just take everything with a grain of salt, and if you agree with the criticism that someone's giving you, then you adapt and you change and you grow and you become better and you find a way to do that, improve upon that criticism. And if it's something that, someone's just being a hater, like they just have malicious intent or harmful intentions for you, just ignore it. Just let it go and to let the world work out the way that it's going to. And I just have a very open mind and a very relaxed and calm mindset about that when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the right approach to have. And, I think if you look at any public speaker, they always get probably just as much negative comments coming their way as they do positive, and it's all about how you deal with them. And I think you've probably hit the nail on the head with how to do that, but also keeping that open mind, because sometimes there is, like you said, validity behind some of the comments that they might be saying, and it's just criticism that you have to take up. So yeah, I think that's a really good piece of feedback to people, especially I think a lot of people might have ideas and they're just worried about what people will say or people will think once they launch an idea. And I think this is the complete correct way of going about it.
Mm-hmm.
So coming on to where you are now, then you've got, I think, Ahana Nutrition and the Income Incubator. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about both of them? Because I think those are your present businesses that you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Ahana Nutrition, we're basically a health and wellness company. So we pretty much create vitamins, supplements, minerals, herbs, and all this good stuff. And we turn it into capsules, liquid drops, gummy bears, teas, and different health and wellness products. So we're basically, our big goal is we're just bringing back ancient remedies to a modern world. That's kind of our mission. So that's what we do with Ahana Nutrition. And then my second company that we just recently launched is called the Income Incubator. And it's pretty much an online academy that's full scale, where we teach people to start their own online businesses. So I share in that 7 different online business courses from actual businesses that I've started and had massive success with. And I literally just share with people the blueprints, lectures, hundreds of hours of material, documents, courses, resources, all this material in this one academy, and it's one price for the entire academy, so you get everything for one price. And it's just pretty much helping people if starting an online business is what they want to do. It helps them get their businesses off the ground. And that's pretty much 2 companies and what we do.
Mm-hmm. And what are the websites for the 2 companies?
It's ahananutrition.com and theincomeincubator.com.
Awesome. So a lot of people might be looking at, especially at the Income Incubator, and they're thinking, well, maybe you yourself have managed to find out all the answers and, you've built successful businesses, or likewise, there's a whole bunch of free resources out there. So what do you think would make people want to sign up for Income Incubator versus going out and doing their own research? Is it more around the convenience, like you mentioned, the fact that you have brought together hundreds of hours of your own research into one place?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest thing that I tell people is that you can absolutely go out and figure out how to start these businesses on your own, but the amount of time, effort, and maybe additional money that it'll cost you from the failures, mistakes, and challenges, that's what the Income Incubator does. It's basically a shortcut. I'm literally telling you because I've learned all the things that don't work, and I know the things that do work, and I'm literally concising it into the things that only work and creating this entire outline and this entire guide, or almost like a path that people can follow step by step to build a successful online business in one of these 7 spaces. You know what I mean? So I think that's where the biggest value is. It's someone who's done it, built it successfully, and sharing authentic content. And I'm just telling you all the things that don't work and showing you the ones that do, so you can pursue those. So it's a big time save, shortcut, and saves a lot of maybe pain and headache down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great resource for anyone looking to start a business. It's probably well worth anyone who is looking to start a business to, in fact, go and check out Income Incubator and have a look at what Jeet offers here, because I think it's certainly something that will save a lot of people a lot of time. For people who maybe they're just getting started on that entrepreneurship journey, are there some maybe key bits of reading or other resources outside of Incubator that you think are well worth them picking up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my favorite books that I read when I first started on entrepreneurship that really opened my eyes and gave me some confirmation in terms of what I was doing was this book called The Millionaire Fastlane, and it's by MJ DeMarco. And it's one of my favorite books. And I think that book has a lot of value for anyone that's looking to like get into entrepreneurship or just kind of is curious about entrepreneurship. I think it's very eye opening. So that's probably my best recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Early on, I think right near the beginning, you actually talked a bit about you're currently working on your personal branding.
Mm-hmm.
For people who might not be aware, do you want to just give us a brief summary on what your view of personal branding is? Just because I've spoken to a couple of different people and they've all said something slightly different. So I'm just interested in hearing about what your take is on personal branding.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of personal branding, to me, it's like when I first sold my first company, I had spent 2 years building up this business brand, and just like that, it was gone. All that effort, all that energy was gone, and nobody knew who the heck I was after I sold that first company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point that I realized that no matter what I do in life, there's only one name that really truly carries on forever with me, and that's my own name. So to me, a personal brand is just like creating a definition or creating like some kind of outline of who you are and what you do and what you believe around your own name. And so that's pretty much what it is for me, is just what are people going to remember me as, and how can I shape what people remember me as in the best way possible. And that's what creating a personal brand to me really is.
Mm-hmm. And I know Gary Vee talks about the importance of personal branding a lot in all of his materials that he puts out there. What recommendations would you give people who are somewhat new and they don't know where to start? What would you recommend them doing to start off building up their own personal brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first suggestion is just asking yourself the tough questions, like what do you want to be remembered for and who do you want other people to recognize you as? And once you can really answer those two questions, then it kind of becomes easy in terms of what kind of identity you want to create, right? Because you're just really trying to create an identity around yourself. And the biggest thing that I tell people is to be authentic. Don't pretend to be someone that you're not, because people can tell. And if you come off as inauthentic, then it's going to be a big problem because people are not going to like associate with your brand personally, especially. So for me, it's just keep it real and just figure out what do you want people to remember you for? Like, what do you want your personal brand to be known for? And that's just how you kind of build it. After you know that, it becomes easy because then everything you do from that point forward for your personal brand revolves around that big question that you just answered.
When people are just starting out, what would you say actually is more important for them to do? Sometimes I think I've seen people who are very focused on the business branding because obviously they want to get things kick-started there. And other times I've seen people doing maybe a little bit more on the personal branding side. What advice would you have in getting that ratio right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, initially, if you're just first starting out a business and that's your livelihood, I think it's got to be your business brand because at the end of the day, you got to make money to pay the bills from your business, right? Mm-hmm. So I think initially it's something that you probably want to start heavily with your business brand. But as you start kind of getting revenue coming in and things like that, I think like keeping your personal brand in mind at all times is extremely crucial. And so I think like you could start off with like, like an 80-20 or a 90-10 type of situation where majority of your efforts are spent towards your business brand. But over time, you want to get to the point where you get to like 50-50 maybe after a year or so. And then after that, you kind of want to flip the script maybe where you're at like 60-40, 70-30, something like that, where you're working on your personal brand more than your business brand. Because like I said, businesses come and go, but there is only one of you. So you want to build your name as much as you can for as long as you can.
Mm-hmm. And somewhat related, I think in this day and age, of course, social media is an absolute essential to be on. If you're not on any social media platform, then I can't see how a lot of businesses are going to grow these days. With so many different platforms out there, and obviously in order to really make a presence on social media, you have to almost be consistently on it. Do you have any advice for, again, new starters there around what's the best way? Should they only concentrate on maybe one platform and just try to come up with a schedule, which maybe is, posting something every 2-3 days or something like that? Or do you think it's better for them to try spread themselves a bit more and go across multiple different platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very subjective question just based on who the person is, what their goals are, what the kind of brand they're trying to build and stuff like that. I mean, for me, the biggest thing that I try to recommend to people is if you can, obviously, try to be everywhere, right? Because your audience and people that may relate to your brand and stuff like that, maybe using different social networks at different times and stuff like that. So there's obviously all the main ones, like YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat. Those are like the main ones. And I feel like if you really want your personal brand to grow to the extent that you need it to, you just got to be everywhere, right?
Yep.
Like you don't want to just have only people on Instagram know me, but nobody else knows me, because then it's like, okay, you have a great personal brand on Instagram, but again, it's a weak overall personal brand. And that's kind of one of the things that I've learned myself as well, because I used to be very like focused on just one or two social networks. And then I realized, man, if that social network dies, my brand is gone. My personal brand is pretty much, a lot of that gets left behind. So I've quickly learned that, you got to be everywhere. Like as new social networks come out, you got to get on those and jump on those and so forth. So that's probably my best suggestion for people.
How do you manage your time though, with so many different social media platforms these days as well, and almost all of them requiring close to constant attention? How do you manage your time between all of those different platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so for me, I'm at a point where I'm lucky where, I have assistants and stuff that kind of help me out with a lot of that stuff. But initially starting out, it is definitely something that's tough to manage, and it just really comes down to, like who can put that extra time in, the extra effort in, the extra work in, because I know like a lot of people that have achieved a lot of success with social media, and the bare reason for their success is because they will respond to every single person themselves individually. And it's just really about going above and beyond, because like I said, if you really want to build the strongest personal brand, you got to be doing things that nobody else is doing. And I think one of the things that I can suggest in terms of like maintaining and managing all that is just kind of like creating content in advance. So like if you're going to post content on social media, stuff like that, if you try to do it every single day at a certain time and then you post it, you're going to see yourself spending a lot more time than if you dedicate like a few hours in one day and you schedule out everything you're going to post for the rest of the week. It'll become a lot easier and a lot faster, because your mind doesn't have to keep going back and forth between tasks. It's just one whole task that you complete as a whole. So that's like probably the biggest suggestion that I could give people.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, especially obviously with Instagram, for example. They now have the whole ability to schedule posts and have it automatically posted through other third-party services, rather than having to actually be on the Instagram app and have it posted there and then. So that's a major win for people who are using Instagram as a platform. But obviously other platforms have already had this functionality there, so it's quite easy to schedule on, Twitter and Facebook and so on. So yeah, that's a great piece of advice. Just stepping back now to your journey and where you're going, what do you see as immediately next for you, maybe over the next year, and then what do you see is going to happen in the next 5 years for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the next year, my really big goal is just to really scale out and grow the Incubator. I think I'm really passionate about that project, and I think it's going to be something that can offer a lot of value for people. So my goal is just to really grow that out, scale it, get the marketing in place, and see where we can take that. And pretty much in 5 years, I definitely want to be at a point where I'm financially free completely, and I want to be able to start fully working on my legacy project in 5 years from now. So I think that would be the really cool place for me to be in 5 years.
Do you have anything to share around that, or not quite yet?
Probably not quite yet, because the vision is still very raw. I still think I need to spend a lot more time to formalize it.
No problem. And I hope that we can definitely have you again in the future, so we can definitely talk about that in more details, because I'm sure it's going to be very, very interesting and exciting as well for people to hear about. I think that probably wraps it up then. Do you have any final closing thoughts, remarks, comments that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd share my biggest piece of advice for people, and that's if you have a dream, if you have something that you want to do, and if it's something that's important to you, there's only really one way to make it happen, and that's by taking action, right? You're always going to be busy. You're always going to have money issues, or not have enough experience, or be super busy. There's millions of excuses you can always use. But I'll tell you one thing, as each day goes by, life doesn't get easier. You just got to get better. So if you've got a big dream that you want to pursue or do, just take massive action. Just do it. Don't wait for the perfect moment. And as you take action, you'll learn so much, and your dream will just come to reality. And that's the biggest advice that I could kind of leave your audience with today.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic piece of advice to finish on there. So yeah, you can find Jeet on pretty much all the social media networks. I'll have all of the links down in the show notes of this episode, as well as Incubator and Ahana Nutrition as well. So you can find all of those in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time, Jeet. Really, really appreciate it. I think you've shared some fantastic advice that anyone looking to step into entrepreneurship or is already on that journey can probably find very, very useful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. And thanks so much for having me on here.